Twilight Syndrome. It's an incredibly intriguing series of games that stars young high schoolers as they investigate rumors of paranormal phenomenon like young people do in real life. They are the kind of games that I would beg people to play because these almost 30-year-old pieces of media do things with storytelling in games that modern games could learn a lot from, and just experiencing them is an event and an incredibly immersive one. Unfortunately, they are in Japanese. They never really sold that well to my knowledge. They've never received a fan translation, and the sort of creator of them, Suda51, is uninterested in localizing them or even releasing them on modern platforms for Japanese audiences because they really aren't his games, since he was only brought into the project of the first one well into development to salvage the project, which he did. I've previously taken you through the first two games in the series, the Twilight Syndrome duology. At the end of the second game, we learn that the trio's series of adventures have been partially orchestrated by some kind of entity so that it could lure them into the Dusk World, so that when they left again, they wouldn't end up back in their own world, but a mirror dimension where things are almost the same, but a dimension where supernatural phenomenon don't exist. Why they were brought here, and why Mika, the airhead of the trio, is the only one that remembers their old world and their past lives, well, I suppose we'll have to dive in to find out. So sit back and relax and let me, for probably the first time in English, take you on a journey through Moonlight Syndrome. We open to a scene of a school falling into ruin while images flash of the school from the Dusk World. This imagery isn't random. This one building falling into ruin while the other building remains standing, it's the timeline that Mika left behind being erased and the new timeline, the Moonlight timeline, remaining. And speaking of Mika, she is heading home from a party, cursing whoever dragged her into coming along. She hears a noise and then turns around, and there's just nothing there. But when she turns around again to continue her walk home, there is a man, and he starts on a cryptic tirade about saving, whatever that means. Mika tells him to act his age and stop living in a weird fantasy world, and then she continues on her way. As Mika walks away, the man tells her menacingly that he will teach her about living in a fantasy world, and then weird laughs are heard, and Mika decides to run. As she reaches the stairs of her apartment building, the strange silver-haired boy from the Dusk World appears. But Mika doesn't seem to quite sense that he is there. She makes it to the front of her apartment building, and then she hears someone say her name from a distance, and after a few moments of hesitating, she walks down the stairs in the direction of the voice, and she sees a man. She doesn't quite recognize him at first, but it turns out that it's Arata. He tells her that he's writing an article about their town, because it's maybe the most interesting town in the world, which Mika doesn't agree with. She doesn't think that there could be a town any more boring than this one. Arata assures her that this town is very interesting, and that it's a place where the past, present and future meet. As he rants, Mika cuts him off and tells him that his stories have a tendency to drag on a little bit. Startled and shook by this, he begins on a new rant, but Mika quickly cuts him off again. He then gets to the point and tells her that she, the school she goes to, and the town, it will all play a part in the events that are about to unfold. Arata seems to know that something dimensional has shifted, and he tries to remind Mika of what her and the other girls went through. Hanako-san, MF in the music room, the boy in the locker room, the angry spirits they summoned, Mr. Sakai, the death platform, the bunker, and of course, Sakura. And he tries to make her remember what happened to Yukari, and she does. It all comes back to her, even though it shouldn't, because it never happened, at least not in this world. She asks him how she could have forgotten, not completely understanding that she can't remember because it didn't happen over here. And Arata, also not quite understanding that it didn't happen over here, says that it makes sense. What they investigated was natural and not out of the ordinary because they experienced it so much. So Mika must have forgotten it because it was so normal to her, like how a normal person wouldn't remember folding laundry the day before. He says that he's here to watch, and Mika asks him to help with the other guy that's perving on her. And he says that he can't, and that he's somewhat of a pervert himself. and he says that the town's mysteries are up to Mika to solve. Mika gets angry and calls him a spineless geezer, but he tells her to calm down, and he says that he can still be of some help. He is supposed to record everything, and he tells Mika that she should find him regularly to record her progress. That way, in case she forgets something or wants to repeat something, she can. She asks if this is some kind of RPG game, and Arata ignores the question and walks away. Mika completely forgot the time while she was talking to Arata, and she rushes home. As she enters her apartment, her mother asks if it's her, and she confirms, and her mother tells her to go upstairs and get changed for dinner. Mika heads upstairs and gets changed, but then passes out on her bed. A little while later, her mother yells for her to come down, but she says that she's not hungry. Later, her phone rings and it's some boy. He wants to meet up, and Mika can't believe that he wants to meet now at this hour, but she nonetheless agrees and heads to the park to their usual meeting place. She sneaks out of the apartment and starts heading towards the meeting place. On her way there, she walks past a guy and she gets a weird feeling from him that she doesn't like. The guy also gets a weird feeling, but it's not one of disgust. He seems to recognize her as someone else, someone that he knows, but he doesn't understand how, because the she that he knows, she can't be here. Not anymore. Mika meets up with her mystery man, and he just stares at her while she tries to make him snap out of it. Later at school, Mika is chatting to a gaggle of girls, and they're gossiping about a motorcycle crash that happened last night. One of the victims was a girl who graduated from the school last year, and she apparently looked just like Mika did, like they could be twins, which might explain the guy from last night. The crash was bad, really bad. So bad that the authorities never found her body, only her head. Mika asks them to please stop talking about it, and one of the girls says that that's rich coming from her, given that she's always the one spreading rumors. Mika says that this is different. This is someone they know and someone that looks just like her, so it's eerie. The girl that just called Mika out, Miho, taunts her and says that Mika is quite a bit more timid now that Yukari is no longer around. Mika asks her what she means by this, and another girl, Kazuki, tells them both to cut it out. But Miho doesn't cut it out and continues, and her and Mika get into an argument. Miho seems strangely irrationally angry at Mika, and then she and another girl, Miki, walk away. In the aftermath, Kazuki tells Mika not to worry about it. It's just that everyone is on edge right now because of what happened. Kazuki asks if she knew that Rumi's older brother went out with Kyoko, the girl that died, and she didn't. And she goes to look for Rumi and ask her about it. I'm guessing that Rumi's older brother is the guy that Mika was meeting the night before, and the guy that she walked past on her way to see him was Ryo, Kyoko's brother. Mika can't find Rumi, but she runs into Kazuki again, who asks her if she's going to see Yukari and Chisato later. She says that she isn't because they have their exams to study for, and Kazuki says it's so unlike Mika to respect these kinds of things, and asks her that since she's free, if she wants to go to a dance club later tonight. Mika says that she thinks that would be a little insensitive to go in light of yesterday's events, but Kazuki tells her not to worry about it, and that it's probably what if Kyoko would have wanted. But Mika sticks to her decision, and Kazuki accepts it and tells her that, well, they'll just do it some other time then. Later, Mika is heading home, and as she enters her apartment building, she sees an old man and says hello, but he doesn't greet her back and just walks out the door. She stops and looks in her bag for her keys, but she can't find them. And then a silver-haired boy runs up to her with the keys and hands them over, and then he runs off again. It was the same silver-haired boy that we saw yesterday, but now Mika is clearly sensing him because she just directly interacted with him. Weird. Later at dinner, Mika's father asks her if everything is okay at school, and her mother asks him why he's so interested all of a sudden, to which he responds that it's because someone at work has a daughter and she recently went missing, and in the aftermath of her disappearance, her parents found out about this whole double life that she lived in Shibuya. Mika says that she's fine, and her mother tells her father not to worry about her. Teenagers are just kind of weird, and Mika is no exception. Mika asks her mother about the boy she met earlier in the hallway, and asks if she knows him. She doesn't. And Mika says it's weird for a kid to be out this late, and her mother agrees. And then she just kind of switches from that train of thought to another and continues talking, like she wasn't really paying attention to what Mika was talking about. The same way that parents of toddlers do when they're trying to focus on something else. Her father then exclaims, "Mika, it's you!" And it's not. It's a news segment about the crash, live from the scene. 4 vehicles crashed, and the driver of a truck was arrested, believed to have been under the influence. 1 dead, Kyoko, and 7 people injured. But wait, what's that? There seems to be someone behind the reporter talking about the incident, and they suspiciously look like the train conductor from the death platform, and the little silver-haired boy, and the other, older silver-haired man from the previous game, and no one seems to notice that they're there. Huh.